So without a sermon text today, which is really unusual for me, I want to share with you some experiences that I had while I was away the last couple of weeks, one in particular, but in some important ways, what happened to me is what happens to all of us. And these experiences are closely related to the Old Testament lesson that we heard today about the obstreperousness, the rebelliousness of the people of God who insisted against Samuel, their spiritual leader, whom God had given them. They insisted that they wanted a king like other nations. And Samuel, as Michael so admirably read, Samuel tried to convince them by telling them all the terrible things that would happen if they would choose a king over themselves. But they maintained that they wanted to have a king. They could not be dissuaded. So they got their king, and as they say, the rest is history. There were good kings and bad kings in Israel. And it's a wonderful lesson for all of us. And the lesson for me also related to the New Testament is the great mystery of the life of faith in God. Such a mystery. These people rebelled against God, and yet God continued to love them and to guide them. And in the New Testament, Jesus gives us two parables about the kingdom of heaven. And at the heart of those, to me, is a great mystery of faith. We can't see it or touch it or feel it or know it, but it happens to us. We affirm that we grow in faith and that God gives faith to people and expects us to use human life as faithful people might. Roger Nishioka said at the Presbyterian meeting yesterday that the great John Leith, who was a professor and a curmudgeon, he said, taught at Union Theological Seminary in Richmond, Virginia. He taught that Presbyterians are a people who differ from other Christians not so much by what we understand about what happens to us, what God causes to happen, but what distinguishes us is how we respond to what happens to us. Many Christians believe things about how God treats them. If they're good, they get treated one way. If they're bad, they get treated another. But Leith taught that Presbyterians are people who differ from others by how we respond to what happens to us. So I was driving westward on Interstate 40, looking forward to a time in the desert. And I have to tell you, I was a little bit disappointed because all this rain lately kind of pulled the desert out from under my feet. It was as green as it could be, all the way across Oklahoma into New Mexico. I got to spend time with a spiritual director in Santa Fe. I got to spend some time at Ghost Ranch, which I love. And yes, the desert's still there. Don't worry. It's still desert. And then I went on to a beloved place, Mesa Verde National Park. And I have to brag just a little bit. I bought my Golden Eagle Pass for just $10, and I can get into the rest of all the national parks until I die for that one fee. That makes me happy. So I spent the night at Mesa Verde, and I got to tour some of the ruins, which I, as a child, actually got to climb on, but they don't let you climb on those ruins anymore. And it was a mysterious, mystical experience. I got to visit some of the ruins of the villages on top of the mesa that were not part of the cave dwelling or the dwellings down below, the cliff dwellings. There were villages, and in fact, in the fires that occurred at Mesa Verde in the late 90s and into 2000, there were abodes and villages that were revealed after the fire that no one had known had been there before. So I went westward into the Navajo Reservation, and I visited a village there. I was as thirsty as I could be, and I was hungry. I didn't have any food with me, and so I went to the reservation store. and the prices were astronomically high. It made me so sad at how high the prices were in the reservation store. I bought a few items, and when I was leaving the store, a Native American woman spoke to me, and she said, "So you're from Arkansas?" I said, "How did you know I was from Arkansas? I hadn't spoken to anyone." Well, my car was parked about 200 yards down the way from the entrance to the store. I had been watched coming and going, and someone had known that my Arkansas license set me off as an Arkansas resident, and someone spoke to me. It was a great experience. Poverty everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. When I was leaving the community, there was a man who was hitchhiking. And so, having been a hitchhiker myself in times in the past, I said, I'm going to pick up the hitchhiker and take him with me. So I did, and I learned a lot from Bobby. He told me about his 89-year-old mother who does not speak English. She speaks only Navajo. He told me about her life of raising animals and weaving and doing things like that, taking care of the house. He told me about the life of the people who are his age, who don't have too much work, and to get work, they have to travel far away to find work, largely in industrial plants such as power plants, nuclear plants, and so forth and so on. So many of them have decent jobs, but they don't have jobs that are near at hand. Bobby told me he wanted to go to a gathering at a crossroads. So we headed for the crossroads gathering, and I thought it would be a few people. But it was about 60 or 70 cars, a flea market, mostly Native Americans selling things from their cars. I think if I'd had $5,000, I could have bought every single thing that was being sold. The most unusual used, broken items, car parts, small crafts, a small industry, a small economy gathered at a crossroads in the middle of the desert. I bought some Navajo tea. Don't you make fun of me. It is tea. It's not peyote. And I bought a necklace, an arrowhead that was chipped and created by the man who was staying there. He told me that it had been blessed and dipped in yucca so it would protect me. I lost it 2 days later. I left the crossroads, and I must have gone the wrong direction. Oh, I did go the wrong direction. And I went for 3 or 4 miles thinking, this isn't the right way to go. But on my way, I had seen 2 people sitting right beside the road talking in the sand of the desert, a man and a woman in their early 20s. They were sitting and talking, and I thought, well, they're waiting for their ride or they're waiting for a bus or something like that. And I went on north, and I got to thinking, this is not the right direction. And I was away from GPS system, so I couldn't check the coordinates. But I turned around and I came back. And as I drove back, they were fighting beside the road. And it was a real fight. And it was a lonely road. I couldn't see any houses. I didn't know what they were doing there. I slowed down. I couldn't believe my eyes. And I rolled on past, and I stopped, and I turned around and I looked. I thought, well, maybe if they see that a car has come, they'll stop fighting. They didn't. And so I turned the car around, and I went back the opposite direction, by which time the man was pinning the woman down like this, but she was struggling mightily to fight back. And I didn't know what to do. So I went on a little, just 50 or so yards, and turned the car right back around, and I thought, I prayed. I thought, what must I do? And I remembered an NPR radio program just recently that talked about how the police from the Caucasian, the white community don't have jurisdiction on Indian reservations. And so their hands are tied. And I thought, do I have jurisdiction on an Indian reservation? And I thought to myself, I'm going to intervene in this fight and get shot. One of them is going to have a gun. Why they hadn't used it on the other person, I don't know, but they're going to use it on me. And so I thought to myself, I've got to make some show or call out or do something. And so I stopped the car and I got out and I started walking over to them. And the man's face was quite bloodied. The woman had really beaten him up quite badly. And she did not have any visible marks on her face. Two young people in their 20s. It was a disaster. It was very distressing. So I said, this isn't going to solve anything. And immediately when I spoke, I looked up and there was another car that had stopped. And a guy had gotten out of his car and he was coming over. And he said, listen, break this up. You've got to stop this. And then there were two more cars that stopped and came along. And they came and physically we pulled the couple apart from each other. I think that's where I lost my magic arrowhead that was supposed to protect me. I'm not sure. But I did. And I had gone to the desert to be changed and to be exposed to some mystery of the faith. And that's exactly what happened. At least that's my interpretation. It's not a scriptural interpretation. But the mystery that's at the heart of the gospel that we can't explain, which we can recognize, happens to us in our lives all the time. And especially when we take wrong turns and don't think that we were going and figure out that we thought we were going the wrong way, but we were going the right way. Today we're going to install a new elder, Twig Satterfield, who has served before on the session. And he's going to have a ministry as part of this church, just exactly the way all of you have a ministry that's part of this church. And your ministry doesn't take place just in this building. I wish it did. I wish my ministry only took place here in this building, but it doesn't. It's a mystery, and you're responsible for how you conduct your ministry. And each session elder is responsible. And on the diaconate, each deacon is responsible for how they conduct their ministry. And God is leading and calling and guiding and blessing, and does so for all of us. Now to God, who is able to do far, far more than anything we would ever ask or think, according to the power that works in us, through Jesus Christ. Amen.